So I've had a few people lately ask me about what my favourite types of foods are. As you'll notice from all of my videos, I mention these foods in basically every video, but people get confused for which ones I recommend and why. So let's imagine that you have a cichlid aquarium, but I don't actually care what sort of aquarium you've got, because this formula works for saltwater, it works for cichlids, it works for goldfish, it works for the whole lot. So if your tank is not super clean and in good clean condition, if it is not, I would use Spectrum probiotics. They come in a range of different sized pellets according to the fish that you've got, and I would feed this exclusively for 2 months. Now, if your fish are not in ideal condition, I would feed Danichi exclusively for 2 months. Now, my opinion on the two different foods. I think for clean, if you want a clean tank, I think the Spectrum probiotics is the best. In the tanks that I maintain, doctors, dentists, mechanics, whoever's tank that I'm looking after, and I go once a month and they're not touched besides when I'm there, I can really monitor the difference in the fish and the how clean the tank is. Particularly when I clean the canister filters, how much crap's in the canister filter, and particularly when I do a gravel clean, how much crap comes out of the gravel when I do a gravel clean. Now, when I take on a new tank, I will find that I'll do a gravel clean and the gravel is terrible. The bucket is black, and I will feed this for 2 months. After 2 months, I will noticeably find that when I clean the gravel, it's really clean. Now, if I notice the fish are not as colourful and magic as possible, then I'll tend to go straight for this one. So I'll go for the Colour Enhancer Danichi, which is that one, or this one. Now, my opinion of the two foods is that these two foods are my favourite foods. Now, there's lots of other foods on the market, but most of them are heavily processed and they're pressure cooked and all this stuff that, makes the flake or makes the pellet. The processing part of it totally destroys the nutrients in the food, whereas your probiotics is cold extruded, so it is not pressure cooked, and your Danichis are actually slow cooked. So all of your standard packet foods I am not a fan of. I like giving my fish a bit of frozen for a bit of a treat, not because I think they need it, just because I enjoy it. So a little bit of frozen every now and then I'm fine with, but not because I think that you should do that. So once again, if your tank is dirty, I'd go straight for this one. If your fish are not looking amazing and in full colour, I would go straight for this one. And once again, there's the saltwater version. This Spectrum you can feed to all fish, and realistically the Danichi you can feed to all fish too. Okay, so imagine that I've been servicing your tank for a while and your fish are super healthy or your tank's super clean. What I will tend to do then is I will feed 80% probiotics because I want my tank to stay nice and clean, and I will feed 20% Danichi. Now, I find in my experience that if you feed just the probiotics, your tank will be super clean. And the reason why it's super clean is because the probiotic bacteria in the Spectrum, which is different to all the other probiotics on the market, because most of the other probiotics are put on the pellet after the pellet is made, so therefore it just dissolves into the water, or they're put in the pellet and then the pellet is pressure cooked, which kills the probiotic. So in my experience, this is the only true probiotic food on the market. So this one, I will notice the tank's super clean. Danichi, I will notice the fish looks super good. Now, if I feed 80% probiotics, I find the tank stays super clean. And I find, in my opinion, that 20% is enough of the Danichi to make the fish look absolutely phenomenal. Now, it is my opinion that if you feed only Danichi, the tank will not be as clean as the Spectrum will create. And it is my opinion that the fish, if you feed just the probiotics from the Spectrum, they're just not quite as good. So in my opinion, adding a little bit of Danichi just makes the fish that pop that little bit more. So anyway, they're my favorite two foods. That pretty much is one size fits all in my opinion. I will feed all sorts of fish. Now in saying that though, not all fish react and eat the way you want them to. So there are other foods, like for example, I will use the wafers sometimes. If there's an individual that just isn't getting enough food, I'll chuck a wafer in. And the reason why I use the Spectrum wafers is because they're water stable. So they actually take a long time to break down in the water. If I absolutely have to, I'd use a flake. But I don't really see any reason to use a flake. I'd still rather use the smaller probiotic. So there are other ones in the range that you can definitely look at, but what I go back to is the probiotic and then the color of the Danichi. Anyway, give us your opinion. Tell us what formulas have worked for you, what combinations have worked for you, what looks good and what doesn't work for you. Now the other feedback I get from people is when they're feeding the super high quality foods, like your Spectrums and your Danichis, I've had customers that say, oh, I run out of food, just nipped down a Woolworths, picked up a bit of that cardboard crap that they sell in the pet section at the supermarket, and then since I've been feeding that, my fish I've started losing fish, and fish actually die. Now, I have seen and heard and been involved in this enough times to absolutely believe it. So once again, if you get your fish accustomed to a very high quality diet, and then all of a sudden you start feeding them crap, it can make them feel shit. Just like eat lots of Maccas, Pizza Hut, chuck some KFC in there. And if you're doing it all the time, you'll be loving it. But if you start a healthy diet and you start feeding on really good quality foods and stuff, then all of a sudden you go and eat some Pizza Hut or some KFC or something, and it looks so good in the ad, but then you feel so sick afterwards. So anyway, I think it is a matter of what you're accustomed to. And also, I guess that's also like living conditions, how you can live in a first world country and your only problem in life is, you know, maybe you get a cut on your finger and you can't play guitar for a day. That's pretty upsetting. Whereas other people have got things that they're dealing with every day that us in the first world just couldn't even understand. For example, I go to Bali. If I drink the water in Bali, I get sick. They drink it all the time. So you get accustomed to a certain way of life. And if you suddenly don't have that way of life, then you can die. Just like if you try and take your iPad off the kids. I'm sure that children have died from taking the iPad off them. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Don't forget to give it a like. And stay safe.